This video, a lot of this video, is going to be about where we stand as a community. Now, obviously, we all hate child abuse, and many of us are engaged in reducing the statistics of child abuse. But frankly, NAASCA trying to eradicate child abuse is an inaccurate statement. Its perspective would be simply wrong and dishonest. Now, a lot of what follows here is going to be my personal opinion, but it is how I lead NAASCA. As the Talmud says, you're not obligated to finish the work, to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. In other words, we all have to work on this issue. And this is where NAASCA stands, that it's an issue in progress. Now, a couple of society's former taboo topics would include things like cancer and LGBT rights. And it took us years and years to overcome these. The first of them, cancer, was such a taboo topic when I was young that you couldn't mention the word cancer in polite conversation. You'd put your hand you'd put your hand over your face and you'd say, "Did you hear? She has the C word." They didn't even say cancer. They said, "She has the big C, the C word." And people go, "Oh my goodness." You couldn't say cancer in polite society. And obviously now, we've been years and years later, we've come to the place where we celebrate all of our efforts to recognize that cancer exists all over the place in all different ways, that research has been done, marches and rallies are held, people wear pink ribbons for breast cancer, and blah, blah, blah. The second of those issues that I mentioned was LGBT rights. And years ago, this was another of the taboo topics. You couldn't talk about or use the word homosexual even. And so what happened was individuals came forward and they, in effect, came out of their closet and they told their secret, their story in individual ways, and that took a lot of courage. But over time, they formed together and banded a kind of a community when they had like-minded people around. And sometimes these are actually physical locations like Provincetown, Cape Cod, or San Francisco, or here in West Hollywood and Los Angeles and so forth. Eventually, though, they were strong enough to show up in force at rallies, marches, political events, and so on. And that really impressed people. Well, we're at this point on our issue, the issue of trying to get society over the taboo of discussing childhood sexual abuse, especially at the beginning. We try to get society over the taboo by largely one person at a time speaking our own story or giving up our secrets, coming out of our own closet of our own abuse. And therefore we break the taboo. But we're now engaged in step two, which is we're trying to create a kind of a community that a lot of this is happening online. This community, we hope, would band together and eventually find each other and find common strength in that. And in that common strength, be able to go out and talk to rallies that, when we call a rally now, it's not unusual for us to call a big rally, do all kinds of planning and lots of effort to do it, and have 25 people show up, if that. And that's really unfortunate. But what I'm talking about that happened with the getting over the taboo of cancer and LGBT issues resulted in 25,000 people and eventually 100,000 people at a time showing up for massive rallies. Well, we're far from that place yet, but we are working towards getting at that goal. Now, it may take decades for us to defeat the natural tendency for peoples of regular society to accept the ugly truth that we have a pandemic of child abuse and it needs to be talked about. But until society is willing to engage in discussing these issues in polite company, so to speak, we'll still struggle to make a significant amount of progress. But what I do believe is that in our lifetime, we can reach that point. As a matter of fact, to go back to the LGBT rights issue, it took, as they say, many decades of people coming out, finding the community, and then going to rallies and so forth. But just a couple of years ago, there was a measurement taken, 52% of the American public in this study were willing to talk about gay rights. It didn't mean they all agreed, but what it meant was that they were all willing to discuss the issues of gay rights. And it was at that point we saw lots of things happen. We saw gay rights issues being addressed all over the country. We saw gay marriage being addressed all over the country. We saw it being more and more comfortable for people to frankly just say, I'm gay or I'm a lesbian or I'm transsexual or whatever. and that really matters. We're not at that point yet. We're still afraid, a lot of us, society is afraid of the ugly truth that this is a pandemic worldwide problem, that unless we get a handle on it, we'll continue and continue and continue, as just as it's done for decades and perhaps centuries. So I do believe, though, as I said, in our lifetime, we can reach that tipping point where the majority of us can put the taboo aside. And that's a reasonable goal, and that's NAASCA's goal. Thank you for listening to this. May God bless you and the children of the world, and God bless adult survivors of child abuse.